Hello, and welcome to the virtual Scandinavia House in New York, and today's poetry reading and discussion on the Outgoing Vessel with Ursula Andkjær Olsen and her translator Katrine Øgaard Jensen, and Sense Violence with Helena Boberg and her translator Johannes Göransson. Sense Violence was published in 2020 by Black Ocean and was a finalist for the PEN Award for Poetry and Translation. An Outgoing Vessel was published by Action Books in March of this year. Feel free to ask questions of the panelists in the chat function. I will also put a link there where you can purchase the books. The panel is being recorded and made available on our website, scandinaviahouse.org, as well as our YouTube channel. Moderating today's program is Paul Cunningham. Paul is the author of The House of the Trees of Swords and The Inmost. He is also the translator of Helena Boberg's words and Sarah Eifrich's Automania's selected poems and The Night's Belly. He is the managing editor at Action Books, co-editor of Radioactive Cloud, and co-curator of Yum Factory reading series and a PhD candidate at the University of Georgia. Please welcome Paul.
Hi, everyone. Hello. I'm Paul Cunningham, and I have the privilege of moderating today's Scandinavia House event. Thank you to everyone who could join us. A Q&A will follow the reading, so feel free to ask questions in the chat during the reading at any time and stay with us after to join the discussion. And now it's my pleasure to introduce four incredible artists behind today's featured books of poetry and translation. We're going to start with Helena Boberg's Sense Violence, translated by Johannes Göransson and published by Black Ocean. Helena Boberg, born 1974, lives and works in Stockholm, Sweden. Her books include Repulsion, 2011, Sinnesvald, Sense Violence, 2013, and Konsten att med vissa melodiska rörelser hemkalla en handangaggen till livet, The Art of Recalling a Deceased Person to Life with Certain Methodical Movements, 2020. She's a translator of poetry, a sometime member of the Surrealist Group of Stockholm. Boberg draws on psychoanalytic, surreal, and feminist discourses in her poetry. She also participates in the feminist literary project Sharia, which over the past 10 years have involved writers from Sweden, Palestine, Iran, Iraq, Bahrain, and Algeria, among others, and workshops to facilitate translating and networking among female poets. Sense Violence was published by Black Ocean in 2020. Sense Violence was nominated for a 2021 PEN America Literary Award. Repulse was translated by Ibrahim Abdul Malik and published in Egypt as the first within a year published Swedish collection of poetry ever from Merit Publishing House 2012. Boberg has been translated and published internationally in several printed and online literary journals in Brazil, Denmark, Finland, Iraq, Iran, Romania, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, and the United States. Her latest book is nominated for Swedish Radio's Poetry Prize for 2021. And Johannes Göransson is the author of 8 books of poetry and criticism, most recently Poetry Against All, 2020 from Tarpaulin Sky, and the translator of several books of poetry, including works by Åsa Vai, Anne Jaderlund, Helena Boberg, and Kim Edom. His translations of Eva Christina Olsen's The Angel Green Sacrament is forthcoming from Black Square Editions. His poems, translations, and critical writings have appeared in a wide array of journals in the US and abroad, including Fence, Lana Turner, Spoon River Poetry Review, Modern Poetry and Translation, Critica, and Lyrikvanen. He's an associate professor in the English department at the University of Notre Dame, and together with Joelle McSweeney, edits Action Books. And now we will hear from Helena and Johannes.
Okay, so hello, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Me and Johannes, we will read together in Swedish English. And yeah, let's start. Kroppen vaknar i mörkret.
The body awakes in darkness.
Tystnaden är inte frånvaron av något.
Silence is not the absence of something.
Allt ropar mot allt.
Everything shouts against everything.
En insekt försöker fly ut ur rummet.
An insect tries to flee out of the room.
Fladdrar, stöter desperat.
Flutters, bumping desperately.
Varken fuktig värme eller månen påverkar dess åtrå.
Neither moist heat nor the moon affects its yearning.
Nerver och dans.
Nerves and dance.
Runt solens glatta skiva en ring av ljust blod.
Around the sun's smooth plate a ring of light blood.
Kropparnas dagsländerliv.
The body's dragonfly lives.
Orden dödar när de utpekar oss.
Words kill when they label us.
Ju mer man försöker gripa dem, desto mer grips man.
The more one tries to grip them, the more one is gripped by them.
Stum om dessa plötsliga försvinnanden.
Mute about these sudden disappearances.
Det finns ett hot i ljuset.
There's a threat in the light.
Blek vår med melerade nätter.
Pale spring with marbled nights.
Platser där man förlorar sina bindningar och hållpunkter.
Places where one loses one's bonds and bearings.
Människor uppspruckna vattenmeloner mot asfalten.
People racked watermelons on asphalt.
En ensam kvinna som lever likt en outslagen blomma.
A lonely woman who lives like one unblossomed flower.
Skogen och havet gör ont, efterbilda det.
The forest and ocean hurt, mimic it.
Mannen spiller gift och hunger.
The man spills poison and hunger.
Det är så mörkt och vackert.
It's so dark and beautiful.
Ett ensamt ägg som lossnar.
A lonely egg loosens.
Jag lockar in dig i min avgrund, klippan där rosorna blommar.
I seduced you into my chasm, the cliff where roses blossom.
Längtar efter din andning.
Long for your breath.
Den osynliga famnen som bär.
The invisible arms that carry.
Sökte ett tillstånd där sammansmältningen med substansen äntligen blir möjlig. Och giftet det som vi är utlämnade åt.
Sought a state of mind in which it would finally be possible to merge with the substances and poisons to which we are exposed.
Tecknets orenhet likt ett litet glänsande smycke. Likt en krokus ännu innesluten i sin egen kropp.
The sign's uncleanliness, a small glowing jewelry, like a crocus still enclosed in its own body.
När du väl trätt in i språket kan du inte ta dig ut.
Once you have entered language, you cannot get out.
Flickorna, deras hår simmar i vinden.
The girls, their hair swim in the breeze.
Lyfter och talet självbespeglande.
Lifts and the speech self-mirroring.
De drömmer med orden.
They dream with words.
Blir till, glider undan likt saliv.
Become, glide away like saliva.
Herrarna dansar med röda guldband.
The lords dance with red golden bands.
Dansar och blundar så nära intill.
Dance and close their eyes so near.
Och fullmånen lyser som var den av glas.
And the full moon glows as if it were made of glass.
Flickorna drömmer vilda lekar.
The girls dream wild games.
Lockar fram det råa och det blinda.
Tempt out the raw and the blind.
Mjuka fodret bjuder in till fest.
Soft lining invites to party.
Månen syr fast ditt ansikte vid mörkret.
The moon sews your face to the darkness.
Öppna munnen och ta emot.
Open the mouth and receive.
Drömmen som växer i de sovandes liv. Ett flerfärgat öga som ingenting kan se.
The dream that grows in the sleeper's life, a multicolored eye that cannot see anything.
Det finns där även om jag inte pratar om det.
It's there, even if I can't talk about it.
På bottnen av en mörk sommar, en stad lika mjuk som en kropp.
On the bottom of a dark summer, a city as soft as a body.
Påminnande om en genomskuren hjärna.
Reminiscent of a cut-through brain.
Kvinnorna rör sig likt vackra blanka djur.
The women move like beautiful shiny animals.
I den violetta skymningen.
In the violet twilight.
Ett vaket öga följer varje steg de tar.
A wakeful eye follows every step they take.
Den mörka sommaren sluter sina ögon.
The dark summer closes its eyes.
Dreglar sitt vatten mot klirrande mark.
Drools its water against clinking ground.
Vattenpärlor.
Water pearls.
Den mannen är så vacker.
That man is so beautiful.
Blommorna hungrar som efter bröstmjölk.
The flowers hunger as for breast milk.
Sensommar ingentinget seglar parallellt med solens huvudskål.
Late summer nothing at all sails parallel to the sun's cranium.
Nacken nästan lossnar.
The neck almost comes loose.
Svalget rent och öppet för liv.
The throat soft and open to life.
Liljeröd gomspalt.
Lily red cleft lip.
Det tunga mjölkbröstet som pudrar.
The heavy flower breast that powders.
Jag vill återvända till allt.
I want to return to everything.
Regn, enkla saker, hat.
Rain, simple things, hatred.
Öppnas för det underbara.
Opens up to the marvelous.
Den intetsägande eftermiddagen.
The vapid afternoon.
Ett tomrum som skyddande sluter sig.
A vacuum that protectively closes itself off.
Var och en dansar i sin dåsiga ensamhet.
Each and everyone dances in their own dazed loneliness.
Kvävda av rus.
Choked by intoxication.
Kroppens ljuva tyngd upphör när natten och mossan är len.
The body's lovely weight ceases when the night and the moss are smooth.
Sväller mot alltets kalabalik.
Swell up against the melee of everything.
Vittringen blir en del av min puls.
The scent becomes a part of my pulse.
Blåfrusen som en snäcka i november äter jag av min mystiska livscykels begynnelse. Min fördärvade souvenir.
Blue frozen like a shell in November, I eat from the source of my mystical life cycle, my ruined souvenir.
Och älskar på så sätt med livet.
And make love in this way to life.
Blir havande med äggstockar, väsande av vildsint kärlek.
Become pregnant with ovaries hissing of violent love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helena and Johannes. It was a fantastic reading. And next we're going to hear from Ursula and Katrine. And just remember, if any questions pop into your head during the reading, you can add them to the chat.
Yeah. So I'll just be starting.
Oh no, I'm going to introduce you.
Okay, you will have to, yeah, sorry, I'll wait.
Ursula Andkjær Olsen made her literary debut in 2000 and has since published 9 collections of poetry and 1 novel. In addition to several dramatic texts and libretti for operas such as Danish composer Pelle Gudmundsen's Holmgren's Solgår Upp, Solgår Ned, and composer Peter Bruun's Mickey Alone, which was awarded the Nordic Council Music Prize in 2008. Olsen has received numerous awards for her work, including the Danish Arts Foundation's Award of Distinction in 2017, the 2012 Montana Prisen Award for Third Millennium Heart from Broken Dimanche Press and Action Books 2017, and the 2015 Danish Critics Prize for Literature for Udgående Fartøj, Outgoing Vessel from Action Books 2021. Her latest poetry collection, Mit Smykkeskrin, My Jewel Box, is currently a finalist for the 2021 Nordic Council Literature Prize. Since 2019, Olsen has served as the head of the Danish Academy of Creative Writing. And Katrine Øgaard Jensen is a writer and translator from the Danish. She is a recipient of several fellowships and awards, including the Danish Arts Foundation's Young Artistic Elite Fellowship in 2020, as well as the 2018 National Translation Award in Poetry for her translation of Ursula's book-length poem, Third Millennium Heart, available from Broken Dimanche Press and Action Books 2017. She teaches creative writing and literary translation at Columbia University, where she served as acting director of literary translation at Columbia LTAC from 2019 to 2020. Please welcome Ursula and Katrine.
So, okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, for having us. I'm so eager to read, as you can all feel. Yeah, so I read from Outgoing Vessel, but in Danish, Udgående Fartøj. Jeg har brugt tid på at tyde, sprede, dumpe fornemmelser fra mit fjerne indre. Tyde dem i deres sammensathed, sprede dem ud i tid. Det var en fejl. Jeg skulle have brugt tiden på at fortætte dem yderligere ind til det punkt, hvor de blev til sten. Det, der er hermetisk lukket. Det, der er utilgængeligt. Det, der er tabt. Nu skal det fyres af.
I have spent time interpreting spreading dull perceptions from my distant interior, deciphering them in their complexity, scattering them through time. That was a mistake. I should have worked to compress them further until they became stone, the hermetically sealed, the unreachable, the lost. It's time to launch it all.
Ingen ud over mig må have følelser. Alle andre, som hader følelser, må det vise sig, at de alligevel bukker under for dem. Alle andre, som hader følelser, må det vise sig, at de i svage øjeblikke åbner sig for dem og bliver bløde af længsel. Blandt alle tidens vindere er jeg den hårdeste.
No one except me can hate feelings. Anyone else who claims to hate feelings, let it be known how they still succumb to them. Anyone else who claims to hate feelings, let it be known how they, in weak moments, open up to them and become soft with longing. Among all time's winners, I am the hardest.
Bare møde nogle menneskeelskere, autenticitetselskere, spontanitetselskere, hjerteelskere, kropselskere. Græd jeres tårer, græd jeres snot, græd jeres blod, græd jeres pis. Ud med det. Som når jeg om natten i måneskin går ind i haven af marmor mellem de ornamenterede vægge hen til bassinet i gulvet, og det viser sig, der er ikke plads i bassinet til det, jeg er nødt til at komme af med. Der er fucking ikke plads.
Just meet some people lovers, authenticity lovers, spontaneity lovers, symbiosis lovers, heart lovers, body lovers. Cry your tears, cry your snot, cry your piss, cry your blood, out with it. Like when I, at night, in moonshine, enter a garden of marble, between ornamented walls. Walk to a basin in the floor, and it turns out there is no space in the basin for what I need to unload. There is no fucking space.
Technoscientific 1. Hævnen er tæt på, lige under huden. Hun er klar, står lige op, hakket opretstående, fuldt frygtornat. Ja, siger ja-dukke til nej-dukke, tag din silke og kom her og sænk din krop i det afslappende vand. Jeg er helt i rædselsornat. Jeg ser min silke spiller terninger på søens glans. Han, hævn, indcellet under huden som en grotte, der sidder klar under hjertet. Herefter falder vi i en sump af forandringer. Ja, siger dukken. Nej, keyword, næringsslammen, silke, sænk dit legeme i det slappe water. Jeg i fuld rædselsornat, et remix, fører mig, min silke og spiller terninger på søen. Ja, dog, siger til nej, dukke, sænk din krop. Det sidder klar, det fjerne, indcellet under huden. Det sidder klar, det fjerne, indcellet under huden. Ja, dukken siger til nej-dukken, dagens silke. Ja, dukken siger til nej-dukken, tag nu din silke på og kom herned og sænk dit slappe legeme i fuldt rædselsornat. Jeg ifører mig min silke og spiller terninger. Herefter faldt vi.
Technoscientific 1. Revenge is upon us, just below the skin. She's ready. Hair stand up, chopped, vertical. Full fear regalia. Yes says yes doll to no doll. Take your silk and come here and lower your body into relaxing water. I'm in total dread regalia. I played dice in my silk on a shimmering lake. He, revenge, single-celled under the skin, like a cave that sits ready below the heart. Afterward, we fall into a swamp of changes. Yes, says the doll, no, keyword, nourishment noise. Silk, lower your body into the flaccid water. I'm in maximum horror regalia. A remix dresses me in my silk and plays chuck-a-luck on the lake. Yes, doll, says to no doll, lower your body. It sits ready, the distant, single-celled under the skin. It sits ready, the distant, single-celled under the skin. Yes, doll, says to no doll, silk of the day. Yes, doll, says to no doll, just put on your silk and come down here and lower your flabby body in all its terror regalia. I put on my silk and rolled the dice. Afterward, we fell.
Jeg ved ikke, hvad det her er. Jeg skal græde hele tiden. Det er ikke normalt. Hvad skal det gøre godt for? Jeg har taget astma-medicin for at se, om det hjælper. Vand i lungerne, jord i lungerne, had i lungerne, noget i lungerne, som ikke skal være der.
I don't know what this is. I cry all the time. It is not normal. What even is the point? I've taken asthma medication to see if it helps. Water in the lungs, dust in the lungs, hate in the lungs. Something in my lungs that should not be there.
Såret i sig selv er ingenting. Ikke det sår, der blev mig påført. Ikke det sår, jeg formentlig vil påføre sårerne, ydmygerne. Smerte som sådan. Rend mig i røven med smerte. Hævnen består i den totale ydmygelse af den, der ydmyger mig, har ydmyget mig. Fordi jeg lod mig påføre såret. Ydmygelsen behøver ikke blodsudgydelser. Ydmygelsen vil arbejde anderledes. Ydmygelsen vil farve blodet pisgult, farve sårene pisgule overalt, indefra. De vil gå rundt i verden, lysende pisgule, indadtil, udadtil. En farve, som vil klingre som pestklokker, gå omkring, lysende af stank, lysende af ydmygelse, altid synlige, aldrig i ly.
The wound itself is nothing. It's not about the wound that was inflicted on me. It's not about the wound that I will probably inflict on the wounders, humiliators. Pain as such, fuck it. Revenge is about total humiliation of those who humiliate me, who have humiliated me. Because I let myself be humiliated, let myself be wounded. Humiliation does not need bloodshed. Humiliation will work differently. Humiliation will color the blood piss yellow, color the wounds piss yellow, everywhere from inside. They will walk around in the world, brightly piss yellow, inwardly, outwardly, a color that will ring like plague bells. Walk around bright with stench, bright with humiliation, always visible, never shielded.
Jeg er et voksent menneske. Det er det, jeg ønsker at være. Jeg er et voksent menneske. Ingen skal kalde mig kompromisløs. Ingen skal kalde mig fri.
I am an adult human being by my own wish. I am an adult human being. Do not call me uncompromising. Do not call me free.
Der er noget galt med min hud. Den har ikke levet op til mine forventninger. Jeg nægter at tage min hud alvorligt. Mine forventninger var, huden skulle beskytte, den skulle ligge som et beskyttende lag uden om det hele. Sørge for, at jeg følte mig vandtæt. Den skulle være vandtæt, tæt på enhver måde. Den har ikke udført sit arbejde. Hvem kan tage sådan en hud alvorligt? Den er et latterligt organ, som burde udskiftes med for eksempel guld.
There is something wrong with my skin. It has not lived up to my expectations. I refuse to take my skin seriously. What I expected, for the skin to shield, encircle everything like a protective layer, ensure that I felt waterproof. It should be waterproof, proof in every way. It has not done its job. Who can take skin like that seriously? It is a laughable organ that should be replaced with something else. Gold, for instance.
Bønnen som det at tale sig selv til fornuft. Er der nogen, som gerne vil tales til fornuft af mig? Er der flere, som gerne vil tales til fornuft af mig? Der er noget galt med mine følelser.
Prayer as talking sense to yourself. Is there anyone who would like me to talk sense to them? Is there anyone else who would like me to talk sense to them? There's something wrong with my emotions.
Jeg er et voksent menneske. I skal ikke pisse på mit tab med jeres unge pis.
I am an adult human being. Do not shit on my loss with your young shit.
At hade sig selv og lade sig selv leve. At hade og lade leve. Det er målet.
To hate yourself and let yourself live. To hate and let live. That is the goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ursula and Katrine. And thank you again to Helena and Johannes. Fantastic readings all around. We're gonna open it up to a Q&A now. And I'm gonna start us off just with some thoughts about Outgoing Vessel and Sense Violence, two jarring dynamic texts that I see as very much in conversation with the other. I almost think of them both as book-length poems operating in sonic bursts or sudden blooms of violent or at times rage-filled language. Helena's language flourishes across the page like flower heads. You never know where or when the next image is going to burst. Similarly, in Ursula's intensely emotive language is frequently shifting into all caps. My body screams. For example, Johannes has described the experience of translating sense violence as, quote, feverish, and Katrine has noted the repetitive and ritualistic qualities of Outgoing Vessel. this reminded me of the way Helena's speaker is constantly stepping or slipping into a man, or ventriloquizing a man to force the self into a girl, to force a new perspective onto the reader. And, you know, I think ideas of humiliation or mocking men are going on in both books as well, for, you know, revenge stories. So I just want to ask, this question is for Katrine and Johannes. Just tell us about what attracted you to this work that you've translated.
Yes, I can go first. Well, I guess I will start by saying that my very first attraction to Ursula was actually when I saw her at a reading. I had a friend who was telling me about this poet, Ursula Andkjær Olsen, that, you know, I hadn't heard about before, and this was more than a decade ago in Denmark, before I even came to the US. And we went to this reading together, and it was such an incredible experience for me to hear Ursula read. It was, I had never heard such a powerful sort of female poet before. She was like a goddess to me, basically. The way she was reading, she was like this, and she was pregnant too. So she was this like godlike deity, and there was so much like fury and power in her voice, in her poetic voice, and that was something that initially made her one of my favorite poets from the very beginning. And then I translated Third Millennium Heart, which is the book that came out before this one, and Outgoing Vessel is the sequel to Third Millennium Heart. And I think this powerful voice is just doing something that sort of, I don't know, to me it was just kind of transformative to be in the company of this kind of visceral imagery, and like, I don't know, there was like a fury in the narration that sort of propels the narrative forward, that I was really intrigued by. And with Outgoing Vessel specifically, it's a lot about grief, where Third Millennium Heart is about life in many ways, and Outgoing Vessel is about grief and death and dealing with it, I think. And to me, that rage was really, I think, liberating to read in the context of grief, because grief is such a, I don't know, sometimes like you read these beautiful elegies or like kind of beautifully created poems about what it's like to grieve. And I just think that Outgoing Vessel is doing something great with channeling that, the fury of this narrator into something that I think is very comforting, like sort of combining anger and grief in this way.
Yeah, I think that's a great description of that book, and I agree with you. The way that grief is so often made into something like to be packed into an epiphanic last line of a short poem and make us all feel comfortable. That's the US convention, and this is like runs completely counter to that. And so I'm really pleased about that. Yeah, so I mean, I guess there are two elements to this question. One is I've read the book first. I'd already read Helena's first book. I'd read her early work that aren't in books either. And I always really loved it. It's kind of anachronistic viscerality. Their language itself is sometimes kind of old-fashioned, but melded with contemporary dictions. And I'm really interested in that by it in and of itself. But I think the second part of the question is like, what makes you translate it? And I think that is the anachronistic quality. That's the language I can't quite, that is a little bit, that is challenging to me. And I guess I wanted to translate the book to have that challenge do things to my brain as a translator. I mean, I think that the first books that I translated because out of maybe a naive idea, like, well, my American friends would really like these books. And I think increasingly I translate things because of what they do to my brain as a translator when I go through them. And I loved that strange, anachronistic, disjunctive lyricism of Helena's. And also I was thinking about summer too. And the poem is in some ways the kind of rottening of summer, and the summer being such a strong myth in Swedish culture, and it's a myth that I'm completely weirdly persuaded by. So I wanted to translate it because of an interest in the similar kind of iconography that I was interested in, and yeah, thank you.
Johannes, I know you have a project in the works called Summer. Were you working on that during the time you were translating this book? Did Sense Violence influence Summer at all?
I'm sure it did. Yeah, I think I wrote. I mean, that book I started writing in 2016, maybe around the same time as I started translating Helena's book. I think I had already started translating it, but that summer we did meet and discuss the translation. So I guess I must have already finished it almost. So yeah, yeah. I mean, that's also a book that is kind of, or definitely engaged with the similar kind of iconography.
Mm-hmm. And Katrine, you mentioned the transformative elements in Ursula's work, and has that been transformative for your own poetry? A similar question as Johannes's, because I know some of those, some of your retranslations just appeared in Bomb. So I was just curious if you'd talk about influence and transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because translating Ursula's work is so transformative in itself, it's like on the page, I guess, in order for things to remain the same, everything must change. And so you sort of have to like rewrite while you're translating, right? I mean, that's true for a lot of translation, but I think with Ursula, there's a lot of neologisms and there's a lot of her own way of saying things that you have to then turn into English in a new way as well, or find inventive ways of doing it. And that inspired me to keep going and take it even further with these mistranslations that I'm then doing sometimes with Ursula and sometimes just with her texts. And it actually came out of the Berkeley Poetry Review inviting me to do some experimental or submit some experimental translations. And I was wondering like what that meant, you know, like what is an experimental translation? Because to me, I just do translation the only way I know how, you know, I don't think of it as an experiment so much, but then I invited Ursula to rewrite these texts along with me. So we took a poem, the opening poem of Third Millennium Heart, and then sent it back and forth between us and kept like applying new rules as to how to rewrite each poem. So I'd mistranslate Ursula's poem, then send it to Ursula, and she would come up with some new rules to mistranslate and then send it back to me. And then I would mistranslate her mistranslation of my mistranslation and so on. And that's what we also did with Outgoing Vessel that was in Bomb magazine recently. So I'm working on that as a whole project to create a mistranslation in conversation with the original translations, so to speak.
Yeah, so the original techno-scientific poems, and maybe this question is more for Ursula, but did they those kind of began in their own way as translations, right? What was the inspiration behind those originals?
In the beginning, I think you couldn't even call it inspiration. It was just the pure need to do something. I had this when I was writing this book, because I really, I mean, like Katrine said, I totally agree that it's about grief and loss, but also not in a nice way, not this grief like a jewel you can show to an, it's a really ugly kind of grieving. So I had the feeling when I was writing it that the human, became kind of just a hammer, like boom, boom, like, you know, these big machines. I don't know, in Danish they're called piloteringsmaskine. Like they bong, they do when to make the foundation of a new building, like they just like dong, dong, dong. A jackhammer. Thank you. Perfect. Yeah. So I felt like I was I became a jackhammer, and then I had to do something. It was just like I couldn't say anything but these very like awful things. And then I had for a long time had this kind of when I had to when I didn't know what to do, I Google translated my work in a lot of different languages, back and forth into and then back into Danish. And then I did this more systematically in this connection. So the techno-scientific texts are all kind of made of these Google translations into, first, I think I primarily worked with languages that I know, that is English, German, French. But later on, I also just translated into whatever things that I don't, languages that I don't know, and then back to Danish. And then they kind of grew into a very large material, and then I just cut off. And then you had these weird things, but also much more soft things. These techno-scientific texts are much more soft and friendly than the human texts. So it was kind of this feeling that the machine could help me be more soft and maybe more human than I felt.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And what did you think of Katrine's retranslations of those retranslations?
I think they're great, and I mean she had done this thing that she because in a lot of a lot of word in the Danish version are in English, as you could maybe hear when I read it, but then she's done this like marking them so you can see that they are different from the other English words, and I mean you could have of course just kind of retranslated them in a wild way, but I really love that they are here, because of course the meaning, what I ended up with having cut free was of course the things that I thought was important for this book. So in that sense, it makes sense that you kind of have the real poem here. So even though it also could have kind of it could have been an idea to just translate them further out in the space, out in space. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that's already happening, extending beyond the book.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do want to remind everyone out there watching that if you do have any questions, feel free to include them in the chat. In the meantime, I see you know, there's the constant references to the new human emerging and outgoing vessel and sense violence. There's the similar wanting to get rid of or out of the body. There's like a stripping away of the human in sense violence and outgoing vessel. And I was wondering, and this question is for Helena or Ursula, or, you know, both of you, you know, were you thinking about a post-human body when working on these poems, a monstrous subjectivity? How does this affect, how does this inform what you, Helena, has called a feminine collective that your work seems to be promoting, searching for?
Yeah, well, sense violence is one of the main themes is sexual violence against women, preferably in this book. And so the monstrosity is the perpetrators, I guess. I didn't think about any post-human subjects when I wrote this. I don't know really. I would like to hear more from your interpretation there. Yeah, and like the quote that you had when you wrote this question, which you sent to me in advance, the only thing I'm thinking is that I want out of my own body. It refers not to anything post-human. It's more like the concept of frozen fright that many victims from sexual violence is experiencing. So it's more like a collective experiences and this structural violence that I'm trying to conceptualize in this poem.
Because it seems like you're cycling in and out of male speakers, female speakers, child speakers, adult speakers. And you know, are you thinking of the speaker as you know, spiritual in that sense, as something ethereal, moving and inhabiting these different bodies?
Well, it's more like both a shattered mind and also it is different voices. It's a mess of, it's a cut up collage kind of poem. Yeah.
Ursula, is that similar to how you're thinking about spirit and the orb, an outgoing vessel?
If it's the orb, it's kind of the picture or the image, that's called the image of all the experiences that you want to forget. You can mold them into this smooth material. That's how it's described in the book. Yeah. So and then they will be all alike. So all your bad experiences you can like mold them into this material, and then you can kind of they will not be yours, or they will not be specifically yours anymore. So it's kind of I think it's about you know, not being able to, and maybe also not wanting to take on your victimized situation or something like that. I think that's one thing that it's about.
That's what I was experiencing also when I'm reading Sense Violence, is that Helena speaker's kind of becoming maybe this voice that hovers above these bodies, that escapes the bodies. I see this stripping away of the human as a vessel in both books, as a kind of as a way to save the self. We do have a question in the chat from Rika, who asks, I wonder if Helena and Johannes could read each poem as it stands in each language.
Why don't maybe we talk about why we read it the way we did.
Okay.
Otherwise it might, or Helena, do you want to read one of the short poems just by itself?
Yeah, I can do that, sure.
Maybe, one of the shorter ones?
Yeah, like, for example,
like on the page 85 section.
Yeah.
Then we can talk about maybe why we chose not to read it in a typical way.
I think it's 83 in Sense Violence.
Yeah, good.
So, okay. På botten av en mörk sommar, en stad lika mjuk som en kropp, påminnande om en genomskuren hjärna. Kvinnorna rör sig som vackra blanka djur i den violetta skymningen. Ett vaket öga följer varje steg de tar.
On the bottom of a dark summer, a city as soft as a body, reminiscent of a cut-through brain, the women move like beautiful, shiny animals in the violet twilight. A wakeful eye follows every step they take. Yeah, like there's not. So we decided to sort of do. We did this the last time we read too. Helena mentioned the kind of montage quality of the poem to begin with. And I think this is what we were playing with, as reading individual lines or stanzas intermittently, rather than the more conventional way of reading first the whole poem in Swedish and then the whole poem in English translation. And also to get at some of the discordancy of language that maybe become more apparent in that kind of reading.
We have a question from Jean and David for Helena. How does psychoanalysis itself change in a Swedish poetic sensibility and wisdom?
Oh, can you repeat it?
Mm-hmm. How does psychoanalysis itself change in a Swedish poetic sensibility as well as wisdom?
I'm not sure I really can understand that question.
I'm not sure. I'm not
like
sure.
If that's like what's a Swedish take on psychoanalysis?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well. That's a big question. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer it. Is it? I don't know really what to say.
That's okay.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's kind of a huge question.
It is, yeah. Kim Koga writes, what are the challenges, if any, of doing a reading like this one?
Does this mean between Helena and mine cut-up reading?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
What are the challenges? I don't know if it's. I guess just following along and not interrupting each other. We could easily start interrupting each other or something like this, I guess. yeah. To me, it's not so much a challenge as I like it. I mean, that kind of keeps you on your toes, and I feel like when I'm reading it, I do kind of forget that I'm the translator, and I want to read not what Helena just read, but what comes after it, because obviously that's already been read. So it's nicely confusing to me in some ways, and I guess that's a challenge, but also for me it's a pleasure or something like that.
Sabine writes, are there any Swedish and Danish writers who haven't yet been translated who have been influential on your work? And I think this question is for everyone.
Oh, that's
big question.
Lots.
Very few have been
so
translated.
Many. So many.
You just want to mention some that are your favorites? Chances are they haven't been translated, so you have a...
Yeah. I mean, it's so, I'm teaching, I have a lot of students, and they are inspiring me every day. And then, yeah, so it's like, it's a very, I mean, yeah, it's too immense for me. I can't really begin, I think, going into this.
Helena, do you want...
I mean, I saw that someone mentioned Inger Christensen, and of course she's, I mean,
oh yeah,
very, very great poet, and also a very great inspiration. Maybe if I should name one, it would be Klaus Høck. He's kind of the same generation as Inger Christensen. He's still alive. He's done something very very special. I think he's reinvented this sonnet form, the sonnet structure, and a lot of, at least his early books, are sonnets, but not in any kind in a nice way. It's in a very weird and brutal and also very political way. So yeah, I really think he should be translated.
Well, I could mention two Swedish poets that inspired me, and that would be Ann Jäderlund, which Johannes Göransson has translated few poems from, and also Lars Norén. And both of these poets, it struck me now, they are very influenced by psychoanalysis. So yeah, in different ways.
I can also follow up and say that I'm extremely inspired by some poets that Johannes has translated too, like Helena being one of them, but also Ursula Andkjær that Johannes has translated. Has her writing has really had such a big impact on me. So thank you, Johannes, for translating her work also.
Welcome. I was also super influenced by Lars Norén, and my most recent book, Poetry Against All, is like a diary of going back to Sweden, but it's mostly a diary of reading Lars Norén's diaries. So that's like an extreme kind of literal influence, I guess. Mm. But yeah, in addition to Jäderlund and Åsa, I also really love Eva Katrine Olsen, who I've translated but haven't been published yet.
We have another question. How are we doing on time? Are we?
I don't know.
We're fine. We're fine on time.
Thanks, pal. This is for Ursula and Helena. Has interacting with your work in another language changed the way that you write or approach your work?
Will you start, Helena?
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not sure I can express myself good enough in English, but when I read Johannes' translations, I can see that he does something with my poems, which is very interesting and gives me a new perspective on my further writing. And what is it? It's something, I don't know, less flowerish. It's a bit drier, I think, and I appreciate it very much. And I think I'm having it in mind when I'm writing, kind of consciously, actually. So something happened, really, yeah. And also now I'm translating Johannes' book Summer, that was mentioned before. And it is, I feel very familiar with it because of many of the themes and images and the flowers and the summer. Then it's a very different poem at the same time from mine, but I can get the feeling that I'm actually the author of it while translating. It's a strange thing that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Helena, about, of course, it does a lot to my sensitivity, I think. I mean, yeah, what the language is, what it does, all the time. Like when I read Katrine's translation of my poems, I always have this feeling that they are that things become larger, and I like that. But it's like it's larger and harder, and that's really something that I like.
I think that's sort of a little bit like the experience I have as a translator and as a translated, is that language becomes larger. And I think that this is like a centrifugal movement, or because you become aware of so many strange connections between languages and possible puns and different versions of words. And I think that's the kind of largeness, that kind of multiplicity or kind of potential in language, that is part of the reason I think why sometimes translation is disparaged, because we would like there to be an original and that the original should have the correct translation. But instead when you start getting into it, you have the way that language hovers and buzzes and moves in different direction, and it's not at all authoritative like that.
No, true.
Rika was wondering if some of Noren's plays have been translated into English.
Yeah, they have. The plays have been translated, but not the diaries. And there are a few random poems here and there in anthologies from the 70s, like Merwin translated some of the poems. But also just like, this is the weird, the thing that happens in translation, little excerpts of poems, whereas in Noren's original, they run on and on for pages and pages and pages. And Merwin would like excerpt little poems for anthology to make it more recognizable. But
all right,
I guess that's it.
All right, thank you everyone for coming, and I turn this over to Kyle.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone, all the panelists. Ursula and Helena, thank you so much for your poetry, and Johannes and Katrine for the translations and the readings, and Paul for the questions. I do want to point out we do have another Danish literary event coming up very soon, which Katrine will be moderating. We'll be presenting the Danish author Olga Rau and her translator Martin Atkins' book, The Employees, which has been nominated or shortlisted for the International Booker Prize. And that event is on May 26th. And all information can be found on our website on the at scandinavias.org. But thank you again. We put links where to purchase the books, but the links are also on our website as well. So I hope everyone had enjoyed this, and I hope we see everyone soon, and hopefully we'll see everyone soon in person. So thank you very much, and I guess good afternoon.